Vegetarians were once a rare breed, but for health, ethical and ecological reasons, more and more people are dispensing with meat in favour of a plant-based diet. The transition from omnivore to herbivore needs to be well planned to avoid deficiencies. And which nutrients need special attention? The answer may surprise you. Stand by, Go Healthy for Good starts right now. Hello and welcome to Go Healthy for Good. Meet David. He changed his way of eating for reasons of health. Watch.
My mother died at 51. Her father died at 51 of the same condition. My father died at 58 from drinking and smoking, emphysema. So I felt that I wasn't going to be around that long. But I just put these planters in last year. I've got a little bit of a winter garden growing over there. Got some lettuce, some kale. I always look for worms, because once I see the worms, I know the garden's going to be successful. I used to eat ham, pork, shellfish, abalone being my favorite. I was lethargic, I was tired a lot. Just didn't feel good. My mental outlook was more down than up. Heartburn. I had that constantly. And then I had a lot of weight that I was packing around. This is kale, and everything that I planted this year all came from seeds. This is going to be head lettuce here, and this is just regular table. The greatest thing that happened to me, I feel, was when I met my wife, Ruth. She introduced me to Seventh-day Adventist and a way of eating. And as I got older, I wanted to change the fact that I might die at a young age.
Good logic, especially as a vegetarian diet and healthy lifestyle give an extra 10 years. On today's show, our special guest is an internationally acclaimed dietitian, author and speaker. Get ready to go through your paces with Sean, and just for those who are underweight, we'll show you how to put weight on healthfully. So let's get the ball rolling with the news. In the headlines, meat messes metabolism, Mediterranean diet for IVF and fish oil failure. Eating meat, and especially processed meat, increases the risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and is associated with insulin resistance. An Israeli study was based on a food frequency questionnaire from over 350 individuals, and adjustment was made for weight, physical activity, smoking, and the intake of alcohol, calories, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Those with the highest consumption of meat were 50% more likely to have fatty liver infiltration and 63% more likely to have insulin resistance than those with the lowest intake. Heterocyclic amines, or HCAs, are formed when meat is fried, grilled or broiled at high temperatures for a long time. High consumption of HCAs more or less doubled the risk of fatty liver and insulin resistance. A Mediterranean diet may improve the success of in vitro fertilization, or IVF. 250 non-obese women undergoing infertility treatment were asked to complete a diet history for 6 months prior to IVF. They were graded as low, medium, or highly compliant to a Mediterranean diet, and pregnancy outcomes were compared. Those least compliant had lower pregnancy rates than those most compliant. Those in the low group had a 65% lower relative risk for both pregnancy and live birth compared with women in the high group. When age was taken into consideration, the only difference was significant for women under 35. The researchers suggest that the high levels of antioxidants found in a Mediterranean diet may be one possible explanation for the findings. So ladies, if you're undergoing IVF, eat plenty of whole grains, beans, fruit, veggies, nuts and seeds. The use of omega-3 fish oil supplements does not appear to provide protection for those at high risk for heart disease, as was previously thought. A study was recently published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Cardiology that combined the results from 10 different randomized trials involving 78,000 individuals followed for a mean of 4.5 years. Those randomized to take fish oil supplements had no advantage over the placebo group in terms of cardiac deaths, non-fatal heart attacks, or any major vascular events, including strokes. So if you're on fish oil capsules, save your money. I'm Dr. Nerida McKibben, and that's today's health news. Today's guest, Brenda Davis, is based in British Columbia, Canada. Brenda travels extensively speaking on nutrition, so we conducted this interview in Tucson, Arizona, where she addressed the American College of Lifestyle Medicine meeting. As a vegan dietitian and author of the book Becoming Vegan, Brenda understands plant-based eating better than anyone I know. I asked her the age-old question, do we need meat to get enough protein?
This is the question that every vegetarian gets. People are just so hung up on protein. Everybody thinks that if you don't eat meat, your muscles will just wither away to nothing. And I can tell you that's not true. I've been doing this for 30 years. And I'm as strong as I was when I was 25, and I'm 58 years old. So you can definitely get enough protein. So there are really two questions where protein is concerned. One is, can you get a sufficient quantity of protein? And the second is about the quality of protein. People think plant protein is somehow inferior. And so let's just address those two. So first, can you get enough protein? Well, if you look at the percent of calories from protein from various foods, what humans need is probably about 10 to 15% of calories from protein. Almost all plant foods have at least that much. So the only plant foods that are really consistently lower than that are fruits. They're 1 to 10% depending on the fruit. And some of the starchy vegetables will be a little bit below. Rice is just a tiny bit below. But generally grains are about 10 to 17% of calories from protein. Nuts and seeds are in that realm as well, with seeds being higher than nuts. Actually, non-starchy vegetables are about 20 to 40% of calories from protein. And legumes are about 20 to 40 as well. Mostly 20 to 30, but soy is closer to 40. And so when you think you need 10 to 15%, if you're eating a mix of those foods and you're not eating a lot of sugar and oil, like a lot of foods without any protein for your calories, it's actually hard to design a diet that would actually be deficient in protein if you're eating truly whole plant foods and not eating all fruits or something. The only way people really fail with protein, a couple of things. One would be not getting enough calories, and two, eating a diet that is either not getting enough calories. Who doesn't get enough calories? Well, people who are anorexic, maybe some seniors, they may not be eating enough. So there are some people that don't, but other than that, or people that are starving, that's not too many of us. And then, of course, the second thing would be diets that are somehow deficient in protein, so junk food diets that are really high in sugar and oil and so forth, or fruitarian diets. Some of the fruitarian diets may be a little bit low if they're not including nuts and seeds and greens and so forth.
In the next segment, Brenda Davis will address the quality of the protein we should be including in our diet. Now, it's time to think about this.
Ouch! I think I got bit by a spider.
Oh, have a seat. I've got just the thing for you.
Oh, good. She'll have some high-powered drug for me, I'm sure.
Here, charcoal. It's a great remedy.
Charcoal? Are you kidding me?
No! You mix it with ground flaxseed, water, and then you make a poultice like this.
You're not using black magic on me.
You know, it's perfect for insect bites.
What does it do?
It takes away the pain, the swelling, and it absorbs the toxins. We'll just cover that with some plastic.
Right, the pain's already going away.
Really? There you
Yeah.
go. It's used for poisoning all the time.
Well, have you ever used this before, or am I your guinea pig?
Lots of times before, Mr. Guinea Pig.
But won't it tattoo my skin?
No, because your skin's not broken. It's not going to leave a permanent mark.
Ah, well, thanks, Doc, for your black magic.
Use activated charcoal to treat toxins, to prevent swelling, bruising, and for pain. Doctor's orders. I've had several of you asking how to gain weight and still be healthy. You know, underweight is a problem for less than 4% of people living in high-income countries, but it affects 30% in low-income countries. Now, underweight is actually, it has a definition. It's defined as a body mass index of less than 18.5. So you need to be sure that you really are underweight before you start doing all this. But for example, that would be a man, say 5 foot 10 inches tall, and he weighs less than 130 pounds. Or 58 kilos, or a woman who is 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighs less than 108 pounds or 50 kilos. Now, this book, Becoming Vegan, is co-authored by two highly acclaimed plant-based dietitians, Brenda Davis and Vasanto Molina, and they have devoted an entire chapter to being called Overcoming Underweight. You know, there are some real dangers to being underweight. Your immune system is compromised. There are respiratory diseases, digestive diseases, hormones are altered, we become weaker, fatigue more easily, lose muscle mass and bone mass. More concerning is there is an increased risk of death from diseases other than cancer and cardiovascular disease, which are more related to being overweight. Now, a short list of risk factors for people who don't desire to be yet find themselves underweight includes genetics, eating plant-based, skipping meals, being overactive, and then psychosocial factors like having to eat alone or being depressed or stressed. Now, some people lose weight as they age because they don't absorb nutrients as well, just less efficient everywhere, the digestive tract's affected by age. That puts them at risk of nutrient deficiencies as well as just weight loss. Now, the typical person who adds, say, 500 to 1,000 calories to their daily diet will gain 1 to 2 pounds a week. But if you're underweight, you may actually need to double or even quadruple that, especially if you work out, you know, you're an athletic. So probably aim for an extra 2,000 calories every day to your daily diet. That is going to require 3 meals a day. So if you're on a 2-meal plan, you need to step that up. So let's look at some plant-based suggestions to how we might add calories. And some real easy ways are nuts and seeds and soy, coconut, non-dairy milks, non-dairy cheeses, and non-dairy yogurts, and avocados. So here's how you might add them. Let's look at how we can actually incorporate them into our food. You know, if you're cooking hot grains, for example, like oatmeal for breakfast, instead of cooking those grains in water, switch that to milk and use a full-fat non-dairy milk. Or when you've cooked, and then in addition, when you've cooked it, you could add some yogurt to that. Sprinkle some nuts on. You know, if you're making up your milk to pour over your cereal, blend in some nuts or seeds so that you actually add calories even to the milk that you have, the full-fat milk that you've got. If you're eating fresh fruit, for example, you might use some non-dairy full-fat yogurt on top and sprinkle on some nuts instead of just having the fruit on its own. You can even dip fresh fruit slices in a mousse made with avocado and carob or chocolate. So garnish all of your salads, for example, with the nuts and the seeds. You can garnish your salad with tofu or with beans. Avocado is a great thing to add to your salads. It really makes it yummy. And then always use a dressing for your salads. You might make your dressing with, for example, tahini or flaxseed oil, so that you're adding that fat into your salad to make it creamy and rich and more tasty. You can make a creamy sauce out of nuts and tofu to put on your vegetables. I love blending up tofu and milk and pouring that into my spinach and mushrooms. It just tastes wonderful. You know, you can be more generous with your carbohydrates, with your cereals, your breads, your desserts, your potatoes, sweet potatoes. They will all be fine. Choose energy-dense foods. When you're thinking about what to spread on your bread, your muffins, your waffles, whatever, think about energy-dense foods like nuts, nut butter, or this is a seed butter, your tahini, your avocados. So think how you look at your plate, think, how can I add some more fat on here? You can put cashew cream into soups and sauces. You can even just grind your cashews raw, put them in a jar, keep them in the fridge or the freezer, and then when you're making something, you just toss in several spoonfuls of that. Real easy way to add that fat in, healthy fats. Use more tofu because it's extremely high in fat compared to other beans. It has twice as many calories, for example, as soy milk. So you can use tofu in so many ways. Because it doesn't have a strong flavour, you can put it in sandwiches, roll-ups, stir-fries, pasta, stews, curries, burgers, soups. You just throw it in. Very, very versatile food. Now, you want to replace water with soy milk when you're making your puddings, your pancakes, your waffles, your breads, your muffins. So if it calls for water, just automatically put in one of your non-dairy milks. Push protein into all your meals wherever you can if you are vegan. So you might think about lentils or hummus, chickpeas, beans, tahini, seeds, tofu, quinoa. They're all good sources of protein, as well as some of those having plenty of fat. Now, if you have a small appetite, just increase the volume slowly. You're not going to whack 2,000 calories in tomorrow, but you're going to build up to that. Extra each day. Now, if it comes to mealtime and you don't feel hungry, don't skip your meal. Instead, just make a smoothie quickly and just drink that down. And remember, if you're making smoothies, put in some nuts or seeds. When you're serving your food, use large bowls and plates and short glasses so it looks like you need to put more into those containers. Make mealtimes fun. Candles, music, pretty table settings, and if possible, pleasant company. Though if you're on your own, that's fine. Do all those special things anyway. Avoid drinking with your meals. Drink your water outside of mealtime. And when it comes to lifestyle, limit your aerobic exercise. You're running or you that kind of thing. Make sure that you're doing resistance exercises, using weights. Start with light weights and then train 2 or 3 times a week, gradually increasing your weights all the time to keep your muscles challenged. So they're always a little bit sore, not painful, but you're just aware that you had a workout yesterday. David's parents died young. Growing up, they ate a lot of meat, but then he married a vegetarian. He wanted to live longer than his parents, so he went vegetarian too. Let's see if it suits him. Watch.
I just have a zest for life that I hadn't had for a long time. I look forward to every day. In fact, every morning I tell the Lord good morning and thanks for such a beautiful day, and off we go. I've had my physical difficulties, and the one way that I can beat it is to stay busy, stay active. I certainly don't want to be a couch potato. I weighed as much as 218 pounds at one time, which is way too much for my size. I was on blood thinners several years back, and I have no need of those. I'm healthy. But I think the biggest thing is, in my life, the change was learning to eat the right foods, because I used to eat all the wrong things. And even though you hear rumors that they're the wrong things, you really don't pay much attention until you start reading the Bible and getting involved, and then you realize that you're a temple, and you don't want to abuse it. And that's what I had been doing for years. I was on the medication, the blood thinners, and since I changed my diet and eliminated those foods that you shouldn't be eating, I no longer take any medication at all. And I certainly feel better as far as physically and as far as mentally. It's hard to just eating what you want, and then all of a sudden, boom, you change. But my mindset, my attitude was entirely different. I knew that's what it was going to take to change my life, and I did it. But we're looking forward to having all the fruit and the vegetables, and for the last 10 years I have a sign out front that says persimmons 10 for $1, which is ridiculous, but it beats me having to clean them up if they get squishy on the dirt out here. That way The people take them, plus they enjoy them, they use them. When I changed my diet, my blood pressure came down steadily. My weight came down steadily. I had more energy. I enjoyed life a lot more, and I still do. It's almost 3/4 of an acre, and somebody's got to do it, and I'm not ready to relinquish it just yet.
Not while it gives him so much joy. In the first segment, dietitian Brenda Davis shared how a vegan diet can give adequate amounts of protein, but what about the quality? Here she is again.
This is the thing that shocks people, is we have 9 what we call indispensable or essential amino acids. And these amino acids, people think we have to get them from animal foods, but actually every single one of those indispensable amino acids is made by plants. And animals don't even make them. That's why they're indispensable. You know, so some point along the food chain, they came from plants. So it's kind of ridiculous to think we can't get them from plants. It's where they come from. So
Wow.
You know, the thing is that some plants might be a little bit low in lysine. For example, grains are a little low in lysine. Legumes might be a little bit, some of them low in methionine, for, you know, as an example. But we have these little pools of amino acids in our bodies that we store any excess. So if you're eating lentil soup and you get a little excess lysine, you'll store it in the pools, and say you have a piece of toast later, you need some lysine, you'll just draw it from your pool. So if you eat a mix of foods over the course of the day, you do not have to even think about protein complementation. And some people think you need to complement and eat grains and beans at the same time.
30 years ago, somebody said,
exactly,
you have to eat the legumes
yeah,
and
that
the
somebody
whole
was
grains.
Frances Moore-Lepay in Diet for a Small Planet. And she actually corrected herself 10 years later in the update of her book, but somehow people didn't hear that. And so people still think complementation is necessary, and it's absolutely not. So quality is not a huge issue if you're including, you know, legumes are pretty important because they're the main sources of lysine, which is kind of the limiting amino acid if you're just barely meeting your protein requirements. Now there's one
and
other...
any particular legumes, or is it
no,
all of them?
all legumes. Wow. Mind you, soy is definitely the legume that has the most perfect profile of amino acids for humans. And a lot of people, and I just have to say this, a lot of people are scared of soy. Because on the internet, you've got this massive sort of backlash against soy, which you can really trace back to, the Weston A. Price Foundation, Mary Innig and Sally Fallon, and a lot of the stuff that they're saying about soy. And if we look at the research, I think we have more research on soy than just about anything. But to me, the acid test is to look at the longest lived, healthiest people in the world. You know, we've got 5 blue zones, 2 of which, you know, you look at the Okinawan Japanese and the Seventh-day Adventist vegetarians from Loma Linda, both consume soy on a pretty regular basis. In Okinawa, it's 2 servings a day. Wow. So if it was so poisonous, I doubt it would be a staple in the diets of the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet. So I think that tells us something, and also the evidence is very strong that it protects against prostate cancer, it protects against breast cancer, it protects against heart disease, it protects against kidney disease. It even can help reduce your wrinkles as you're aging, male pattern baldness, symptoms of menopause. So there are lots of good things about soy. I think the one thing we need to be a little cautious about is so much of our soy is highly processed. And so it's better to be consuming less processed soy, like the tofu and tempeh and organic soy milk and those kinds. Edamame and soybeans.
Yes.
Those are all really good foods. And then just one last thing I want to say about protein, because, you know, there are some within the plant-based world who would have people believe that protein is never an issue. And we need to be careful of that because it is an issue for some people. And so, for example, the teenager who's switching over from a meat and potato diet to, you know, a vegetarian diet, and they're into animal rights and they're not thinking about nutrition, they may eat a double order of fries instead of a burger and fries, or they may be sucking back sodas or whatever. They may not get enough protein eating that kind of diet, and it's really important for their growth and development. I mean, protein's what we build and rebuild our body tissues with. And the other group that I'm concerned about is seniors, because a lot of them, their caloric intakes, are significantly reduced quite often, and their ability to absorb protein is compromised. So they may absorb about 25% less than a healthy younger adult. And so we do see people with, sarcopenia or, muscle wasting as they get older, because they're not including richer sources of protein. And for those individuals, I would say even having, tofu, tempeh, but even some meat analogs would be a reasonable choice, because they're so super highly digestible, and so they're getting a good source of protein. And it doesn't have to be a major part of their diet, but it can be a part of their diet, at least on occasion, and they need to be eating the legumes.
So perhaps a couple of times a week, if they had one of those meat analogues, might be sufficient for them.
Yeah.
And they need to be thinking about stepping up. So you're suggesting maybe even 30% more protein just to top up what they're absorbing.
A lot of experts are now saying, so it's 0.8 grams per kilogram protein that we need per kilogram body weight for healthy adults. As we get older, a lot of experts are now saying 1 to 1.2 or even 1.3 for seniors could be a better target, which is harder for them because they have to do that on fewer calories, right?
Right.
So it becomes a little more challenging. So then the lentil soups and the, chickpeas on their salad and so forth, that becomes more critical for them. And even in their milks, they need to think about if they're having milk on their cereal, it may be that soy milk would be a better choice than almond milk, which has almost no protein, unless they get a higher protein. There are some that have pea protein added or whatever. The other thing they can do is, although a lot of seniors wouldn't want to do this because it's extra work, but I actually blend hemp seeds into my almond milk to increase the nutritional value of the milk and increase the protein content.
Great idea to boost almond milk. And now consider the question of milk in the Bible. Through Moses, God promised the Israelites that he would lead them to a new country, to a good and large land flowing with milk and honey. I've been asked if God was encouraging the consumption of milk. Actually, as slaves, they lived in poverty, overcrowded and overworked, in a country that was very hot and dry with vast stretches of desert around them. Quite a contrast to a land flowing with milk and honey. But did they understand God's word picture? Egyptian hieroglyphs depict beekeepers and people milking cows, and pots of honey were found in Egyptian tombs. So yes, they would have known how much water and how fertile the land would need to be to support all those animals and for the flowers that bees could make honey from. A large and generous land to raise animals and children, gardens and orchards, a land that would give them freedom and sovereignty. They must have run out of Egypt into the desert in search of their new country. We are often enslaved by habits, circumstances, and even illness. Jeremiah 11:29 says that God has a plan for us, to prosper us and not to harm us, to give us a future and a hope. Our promised land is heaven, to be with Jesus, reunited with our loved ones, and living forever. So if you feel like you're living in a desert right now, don't despair. There is a better land coming. We're back. It's time to get out of that comfortable chair and get moving with Sean. Hi, Sean.
Good to see you.
Good.
So look at that.
Yeah.
Just one lonely weight.
And it looks like it's ready for action.
It is.
Yeah.
Let's get warmed up first.
Okay.
All right, we're going to start with some jumping jacks, all right? But these are going to be low jacks, all right? So you literally come here, get nice and low. So you see my feet? See, I'm sinking into it. You keep going. Working the delt, working the quads, work on the glute. All right, give me one more. One more. Perfect.
And working the heart.
That and the heart, absolutely. One of the great exercises that you can do is plyometrics. It's jumping, all right? Jumping allows you to burn some calories, get warmed up, prepares you for your exercise.
And it keeps you agile.
It does.
If you don't do any jumping, you tend to get a bit clumpy.
Absolutely. Especially if you're at a desk job all day, you need some movement, all right? So this is a kettlebell. We've used it before, and I'm gonna show you how to burn a lot of calories with one weight, okay? We're gonna start with the swing, okay? The weight is gonna be here, okay? And I'm gonna give it to you actually, because you love to work. All right, so what I want you to do is you go back first and then come up. Yes, perfect. This is a kettlebell swing. It works the entire body. If you're looking to burn calories, and the heart rate goes up, all right? So the key here, stand up nice and firm, push your hips forward, get intense with it, set your timer for 30 to 45 seconds and work really hard. You gotta push through it, okay? There you go, 3, 2, and 1. I'll show you the next one.
Okay.
Perfect. That's a kettlebell swing. More than likely, after you finish a kettlebell swing for 30 to 45 seconds, your heart rate will be skyrocket, okay? So rest for about 30 seconds, bring the heart rate down, prepare yourself for the next movement.
Right, because you've got to pay back some of that oxygen debt.
You do, you do.
Yeah.
So if you see here, the kettlebell is resting right here on my forearm and on my arm, right? And what I'm gonna do is squat down, right here, and press. Press. My other arm is my stabilizer muscle, my stabilizer arm, so that it doesn't kind of go left to right. So it's just there as a support beam. I don't necessarily need it, but as you get more confident, you can put it here, you can put it to the side. All right, you can try. This is, put it right back there. Sink into the squat, point that elbow forward, right? Squat down as much as you can and press up. Yep, there you go. This is a total body exercise. Now the beauty of this is that you have that weight on one side of the body, right? So the other side of your body has to stabilize. So the heavier you go, the more the other side has to work to keep you stable, all right? It is an absolute way to engage your core, keep the body nice and challenged. All right, switch the other side.
And you don't know which muscle is screaming the loudest.
You
right
don't.
Now. Your arm's going, no, it's me, it's me.
Your legs are going, I thought it was me.
Now is it right?
So turn around, put the hand in there, turn, let go. Put your hand right in there. Yep, rest it in here, point that elbow. The kettlebell you can get at any store nowadays. And go ahead, and press, perfect. You can go for about a 10-pounder, 15-pounder. They go up to about 98 pounds.
No kidding.
And they get heavy. I had one mailed to my house and the mailman was mad at me. It really was. But it was so awesome. I showed him what it was. There you go, one more.
So order that at about middle of March. It should arrive by April Fool's Day.
There you go. So you got the swing, and then you have this squat and press. We're working the upper body and the lower body. We're working tons and tons and tons of calories. Okay, the other one, the last one, just to work the entire abdominal area. I'll demonstrate this real quick. You have a seat. You take your kettlebell. You can have your, if you don't have a weight, you can use a can of beans, anything of just a little bit of weight. Have a seat, put your legs up a little bit, and twist. I have my legs up just to give myself a challenge, but if you feel okay and you don't want that challenge yet, keep your feet down and bring the weight all the way to the side. The more you bring it to the side, the more you challenge those abdominal muscles, all right? So still, challenge yourself, try, okay? And that is your Mason twist, okay? I'll help you. So you got 3 exercises, your kettlebell swing, your squat and press, and then your Mason twist. Absolutely great ways to burn calories, put some rest in there, and have some fun with the kettlebell. That one weight.
That one weight goes a long way.
It does go a long way, all right? So what you gotta do after that, you gotta stretch, okay? So let's take a nice deep breath. Inhale and exhale. One more time, inhale. Open those lungs up and exhale nice and slow. all right? Hands down to the middle. Get a good stretch, open your hands up, get all the way down, stretch those hamstrings. Get over to the right side. 3, 2, 1, left side. Come back to the middle. Come up nice and slow, because if you come up too fast,
You'll end up
go
on the
down
floor.
fast. All right, big circle with your neck. And you are done.
Thanks, Sean.
You're very welcome.
Great.
Good job.
Something as delicious as a palm full of cashews or a slice of whole grain toast could reduce your risk of heart disease. The Adventist Health Study found that regularly eating nuts and whole grains carries a lower risk of coronary heart disease. This is good news. Brown rice, quinoa, and hazelnuts are all flavorful, heart-healthy foods. Nuts and whole grains could keep your ticker going for many more years. Regularly consuming nuts and whole grains is another ageless advantage.
And now for your questions. Donna asks, my hair is thinning, especially at the front, despite taking vitamins for hair loss. What should I do? Well, Donna, there are many reasons for hair loss. Often for women it relates to hormones. So it happens during pregnancy, at childbirth, and then again at menopause. It also happens if our thyroid tests are low. So it also happens with stress. That's the commonest reason. But if you have a family history of thyroid disease, you might want to ask your doctor to check your thyroid function next time you're having a blood test. If you're only taking vitamins, that may not be sufficient. You might want to add in minerals. Often you get a combination of vitamins and minerals in supplements, and they can help to slow the hair loss. But you know, we all have stress, but we don't all lose our hair. So you might want to consider whether you need to address the amount of stress that you have, and then be sure to get enough sleep and exercise and a well-balanced diet so you get all those nutrients to help you deal with stress. Here's our next question. Any tips on how to balance sugary foods for those with diabetes? I challenge you to do a 3-week sugar-free challenge. Once you've broken the addiction, you'll find that fruit tastes perfectly sweet enough and you won't need those sweets. And then just make unsweetened dried fruit the sweetest thing you ever eat. You can sweeten your recipes with dates or apple sauce or mashed bananas, and you get around this problem very easily and healthfully. And last question, Susie asks, how can I lower my fasting blood sugar? Well, if you're measuring your fasting blood sugar, I presume that you have diabetes. So just a few little tips. We've got lots of programs on diabetes, but just some little tips here. Don't drink with your meals. Drink between your meals. Try to eat at least half a cup of legumes every day, preferably at all your meals, including breakfast. If you can eat them at breakfast every day, and that's the only meal, that will work as well. Try to shift your calorie intake earlier in the day so that you have a large breakfast and a lunch, and a tiny supper or no supper at all. Walk for 10 minutes after your meals, as well as your 30 minutes of more intense exercise before breakfast. Now remember, if you have a question, you can send it in by Facebook, text, email or phone. We love to hear from you. Like us on Facebook and become part of our Go Healthy for Good community. Now, let's see what's in the store today. Lemons are the most commonly used citrus. They're native to Asia, but they've migrated all over the world. We use their juice and their zest more than we use their pulp, so look for smooth, brightly coloured skin. And if the fruit feels heavy for its size, then it should be nice and juicy. The juice is useful to preserve foods that oxidize and discolor quickly, like apples, bananas, or avocados. Once squeezed, there's a quick loss of vitamin C, so be sure to drink your lemonade right away. Recent animal research suggests that citrus have anti-cancer properties. Also, if you want to alkalinize your body in the mornings, then squeeze fresh lemon juice into your morning water. But be careful, it will erode the enamel on your teeth. So you better use a straw. Bon appetit. In a vegan diet, we don't just leave off meat, but also dairy. However, the mantra is that we need dairy to build strong bones. I asked today's guest, Brenda Davis, for comment.
You know, it's so interesting because I think a lot of our education about healthy bones comes from the dairy industry. From the time we're in grade school to even in university, when I can remember when I was in, and I mean we're talking late 70s, early 80s, that I was in university. we got all kinds of free information from the dairy industry about how important dairy products were to bone. So we were getting trained back then in university. And so it's so ingrained in our culture to believe that dairy is necessary. We have the milk mustache and all of these very, very strong sort of advertising initiatives to help people to understand how critical milk was to healthy bones. And so
is it really necessary? I mean, that we've had that messaging all our lives,
yeah,
but it's not the truth, is
but
it?
No, it's not the truth. So if you think about this, every mammal produces a milk designed to nourish their offspring. And to think that any mammal would require the milk of another mammal is ridiculous.
And it's for the rest of their lives.
For the rest of their lives. So yes, we need the milk of our mother, and if we don't get that milk, we need an appropriate substitute. But every mammal, deer milk and moose milk have twice as much calcium as cow's milk. We don't make those essential foods. It's just silly to me. But that doesn't mean calcium isn't important. Calcium's very important. We need calcium for many, many functions in the human body, including the strength and so on of our bones and the building of and rebuilding of bones. But I can tell you this, I haven't consumed dairy for probably about 30 years, and I have a fairly strong history of osteoporosis in my family. I had my bone density done probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and as I said, I'm 58, so when I was around 50, and my bone density was so high they couldn't plot it on the chart. It was 2.5 standard deviations above norm for my age. Now, my doctor was shocked because he knew I didn't consume dairy. He just couldn't understand how I could have any bones without consuming dairy. It was just, his jaw dropped when he looked at my, I had a complete sort of gold standard bone scan. He was really shocked.
So did you supplement calcium?
Never. I've never supplemented calcium, but I exercise on a daily basis, and I'm very committed to that. I do weight-bearing exercise, which gives your bones the signal that they need to stay strong. And then the other thing I do is I make sure I'm eating good sources of calcium. So I'm very conscious of that. So for example, if I consume a non-dairy milk, it's a fortified non-dairy milk. If I am selecting greens, I'll more often choose the greens that are low in oxalic acid, because the greens that are low in oxalic acid, like kale and broccoli and all that, most of the Chinese greens, and like Napa cabbage and sui choy and bok choy and all of those greens, turnip greens, they're lower in oxalic acid, and so we absorb about 40 to 60% plus, even broccoli, of the calcium that's there. In greens that are high in oxalic acid, like spinach, beet greens, Swiss chard, we only absorb probably 5 to 10% of the calcium in those foods. It doesn't mean they're not good foods. They're loaded with nutrients. They have we get a little bit of calcium from them, but we can't rely on them as major calcium sources. And then if you think about this, people who eat, a lot of meat is not a source of calcium unless you're eating the bones. But from salmon, you'll get some from the bones, but meat is not a source of calcium. So if instead of the meat, you're eating legumes, which are a good source of calcium, you're eating almost everything you eat. You get a little bit from your legumes, a little bit from your vegetables, a little bit from your whole grains, a little bit from even the fruits and and of course the leafy green vegetables especially. So everything you eat provides a little bit of calcium. And if you're getting it that way, the absorption is much greater when you're getting bits throughout the day or in your meals than if you just have this one bolus of 2 cups of milk at one sitting. And also to note that in cow's milk you absorb about 32%, maybe 34% of the calcium, about a third. And in tofu it's about the same. In soy milk it's maybe 25 to 30%. In the leafy greens it's higher, 40 to 60%. And then in beans and nuts and seeds it's a little bit lower, probably around the 20-25%. So there's also this difference, not just in the amount of calcium in a food, but actually the rate of absorption. So that's important to know. But no matter how much calcium you're getting, you need all the other bone building nutrients. You need vitamin D, you need vitamin K, you need potassium and magnesium and zinc and all of these nutrients, even essential fatty acids that work together to help keep bones strong. So it's not just about calcium.
You don't want to miss the next segment. I learned so much about calcium and bones from Brenda, so stay by. David has a zest for life. He's grateful for every day, and he's excelling mentally, physically, and spiritually. He no longer has hypertension, his weight is normal, and he enjoys his large garden, all because he changed his diet and lifestyle. Watch.
Yes, I was born crippled, but I spent the first 15 years under doctor's care and many operations from the knees on down to the tip of my little toes. Growing up with that physical handicap, it was always a challenge to walk. And I was one of those kids that I didn't think I was that bad, but I was usually picked last or not picked at all. It's left its mark all my life. But I look forward to walking where before it always was kind of a struggle. I had to do it because I knew it was good for me. But now I look forward to going out. Wanna go for a walk? Come on. And I have my little guy here, and that gives me an excuse because I have to walk him. He needs the exercise. The getting started and the stopping are the two bad things about walking. Because you're stiff when you start, and you loosen up while you're walking, and you're stiff when you quit. But it's worth the walk. It really is, and I really enjoy it. I think I'm in pretty good shape for 75. I really do. People say, oh, you don't look that old, but I'm sure a lot of them just say that to be nice. But I don't feel 75. Mentally, like I tell everybody, I'm still about 13, 14 years old. And I honestly hope that doesn't change. You know, I have enough life in me at my age where I just enjoy doing what I do. And I'm not tired of doing it. And I'm excited about doing other things. What I do here is, you'll see some of my paintings. I've got so many paintings, I've got a lot of them put away, but I've got a lot of ribbons. I've had a couple best of divisions, no best of shows. But this is my favorite. That's an acrylic. When I first started getting into acrylic. I've had my knees replaced. That was the last thing that I've done. And I'm still out there, 75, walking. And I feel great. And so, and all the guys that wouldn't let me play with them, I'm still having a great time.
Looks great from here. Now back to how our bodies work with all the nutrients we give them to build strong bones. Before the break, dietitian Brenda Davis was explaining that we absorb only 20 to 60% of the calcium in our food. What about the calcium lost by our kidneys? There's a balance between what we eat, what we absorb, and what we excrete. How much from each? Here's Brenda.
Your calcium intake is responsible for about 11% of calcium balance. Excretion is, I think it's about 74% of calcium balance. And then your absorption is another 15% or something. But the biggest factor in calcium balance is calcium excretion.
Wow.
Urinary excretion.
So how do we alter calcium excretion?
Yeah, so the things that cause increased calcium excretion are sodium. So high salt diets are not good for calcium balance. Having a very acidic diet, a lot of meat, that's not good for calcium balance. Now, protein is a funny thing. People used to think that protein had a negative impact on calcium balance because it causes us to urinate out more calcium. But at the same time, so it's like there are two faces of protein. One is we urinate out more calcium. On the other side, it helps with the absorption of protein, and it helps with the absorption of calcium, and with bone building. So if we look at all of those things that protein does, it actually has a slightly beneficial effect on calcium balance. And what's really interesting is there was a study done, a Seventh-day Adventist study that was done looking at women, and I believe it was postmenopausal. I can't remember if it was pre or postmenopausal or perimenopausal women, but basically what it showed is women who consumed the most protein, like they were consuming legumes or even meat analogs. I think legumes, they had a 63% risk reduction in wrist fractures, and with meat analogs it was like a 49% risk reduction, even though meat analogs are fairly high in salt. That's how important the protein was. The people with the lowest, the women with the lowest protein intakes had the greatest number of wrist fractures.
Does too much protein then trigger?
Yes, and so the people that are at a disadvantage with protein consumption is those guys that are slugging back these massive amounts of protein powders and they're not consuming. So like people eating a Paleolithic diet, for example, or what's not a Paleolithic, it's what they call a paleo diet, which is a lot of meat and vegetables. Well, they're not eating any dairy, and they're not eating a lot of calcium because it's meat, which doesn't have much, and then they'll get a little bit from their green vegetables. So their intake of protein, all of this meat, plus they're often, this CrossFitters and so on, they're drinking back these protein powder beverages. They may be consuming 150 or 200 milligrams of protein a day with maybe 400 or 500 milligrams of calcium. They're in trouble. And so in the long term, that's a huge downside for paleo diets.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and you say long term, so we're not going to see that effect for some time.
No.
Now you mentioned vitamin D, because we know vitamin D is important for bone health. Where do we get that in a plant-based diet?
Well, and it's one of the tricky nutrients. It just is, because vitamin D traditionally in an omnivorous diet is going to come from fish, it's going to come from, fortified milk, it'll come from a little bit from eggs, there are a few foods. But from the foods in a plant-based diet, you've got some fortified non-dairy milks, you've got fortified margarine, which isn't a healthy food, so you're trying to avoid that anyway. So there, unless something's fortified with vitamin D, there are not a lot of natural vitamin D, except mushrooms, and then it depends if mushrooms are grown with light versus in a dark. So they need to be exposed to light to be good sources of vitamin D.
Just like us.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing, is if you can get some exposure to sunshine, that's really an ideal source of vitamin D, of course. But if you live in northern climates, like I do, I live in Canada, so we have what we call the vitamin D winter, which goes from about October to March. And the vitamin D winter should be called the no vitamin D winter, because you can't make vitamin D in those months. Right. So we're kind of out of luck unless we go to Hawaii. And of course, vitamin D is stored very well. So if you get lots of exposure in the summer, it could tide you over for several months. But essentially, what we're seeing is a lot of people who are vitamin D deficient. And so we really do need to make sure that we're incorporating a vitamin D supplement if we are going without exposure to sunshine for that long.
How much should we take?
It's debatable. And I think it depends on your age. It depends on your vitamin D status. I think for most people, 1,000 IUs a day is a very reasonable target. I think for older people and for people that have lower status, they may be looking at a couple thousand IUs a day.
B12, that's another issue, isn't it?
You know what? All I will say is you absolutely must have a source of B12 if you are not consuming animal products. And even if you are, if you're over the age of 50, the recommendation from the Institute of Medicine is everyone over 50 should not rely on animal products for B12. And the reason is simple. B12 is bound to protein in animal products, and as you get older, the ability to produce the enzymes and the acid in your stomach that cleave that B12 off the protein it's bound to diminishes. And so everyone over 50 needs to use fortified foods or supplements as a reliable source of vitamin B12. And it's, how much do you need? Well, probably 1,000 micrograms twice a week is a reasonable amount. or 10 to 25 micrograms a day. The RDA is only 2.4 micrograms, but it's likely not enough to keep your homocysteine levels down, and because absorption is pretty iffy. It's probably better to go a little bit more than that. But there was a study recently that just came out showing the men that were consuming more than 55 micrograms of B12 a day, who were smokers, had a greater risk of lung cancer. And so we're not sure why, but there's some research suggesting we may not want to. We used to think you couldn't overdo it. You could have as much as you want. Now there's some questions, and there's questions about the form of B12 too. So the cyano versus methyl and adenosine and so on. So those are all issues to consider.
If you're a vegetarian, be sure you're getting around 0.4 grams of protein per pound of body weight, or 0.8 per kilo. If you're older, step that up by at least half as much again. And to get all the essential amino acids, eat a good variety of whole grains, legumes and veggies. Recently, there's been a study suggesting high-dose calcium supplements may increase the risk of death from heart disease and strokes. Other studies say not. Meantime though, let's eat calcium-rich foods like cruciferous veggies instead. Be sure to get vitamin B12 as a supplement, and if you think you don't get enough sun exposure all year round, then also take vitamin D. That's all from me today. Thanks for joining us on Go Healthy for Good. I'll see you next time.